Hi, viewers. My name is Upesh Jain, and greetings from the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm the host of the Exec Talk channel, a forum I started to talk to CEOs and executives about their journeys and distill their experiences and learnings for our viewers' benefit. Today, I have the honor of talking to Manish Chandra, founder and CEO of Poshmark. Manish's trajectory has been meteoric, to say the least, so it's a privilege to talk to him today. Let me shed some light on his background and accomplishments. Manish spent his formative years in India and went on to get a B.Tech from IIT Kanpur, one of India's premier engineering schools. He came to the United States as a student to do a master's in computer science at UT Austin. He started a career as an engineer at Intel in 1989, working in the area of databases. After Intel, he joined Sybase as a pioneer in databases and worked his way to become a chief architect in a short period of time. He also picked up an MBA from Haas School at Berkeley and then went on to Versata and Versant as VP of Marketing. In 2005, he founded Caboodle, which was amongst the first online fashion-oriented shopping platforms. Caboodle was sold to the Hearst Group, after which he started Poshmark about 12 years ago. Besides his professional qualifications, it is a pleasure to talk to Manish on a variety of topics. He has an acute appreciation for music, books, movies, food, and fashion. He's an excellent conversationalist, and one can talk to him on a variety of esoteric topics for hours on end. Today, however, we will stick to his personal journey. So welcome, Manish, and thanks for making time.
Thank you, Upesh, for having me, and congrats on launching this series.
Great. So let me start, Manish, by asking you about your early days growing up as a child. Did you have any role models, enablers, or recognizable traits that impacted your life as it stands today?
Well, I was surrounded by really amazing people. My father was extraordinary in terms of his ability to both synthesize what was happening in the society, because we were growing up in small towns and big towns in the state of UP, but also being very open-minded. So, for example, we were staying in a border town and we were being exposed to things like hunting and going out and sort of looking at, meats and eating that. And even though he was very strongly vegetarian, he was open to us, for example, being able to go out and eat meat. So that open-mindedness was something I learned from my father, as well as being open to a lot of different folks. My mother encouraged us always to focus on academics, read books, study. So I would say, bring that strong discipline from an academic perspective and focus, what we call today, strong tiger moms. My mom was definitely very much the architect of our academic journey and really behind us. He had a master's degree, which in that time, again, was exceptional. But on the entrepreneurial side, my real role model was my grandfather, my Nana, my mother's father. He had a pharmaceutical shop in Chandni Chowk, and all through my growing up, I spent summers visiting him and being sort of brought up in the bazaars of Chandni Chowk, interacting, seeing merchants transact, and sort of being exposed to retail and wholesale very early on in my life.
That's a wonderful backdrop to your early days growing up, and I'm sure those were strong influences. So what were the main inflection points in your career from being an engineer to being an entrepreneur? I guess your grandfather was one of them. But apart from that, does anything stand out?
I would say that my first foray in my career was with Intel. And at that time, Intel was an 8 to 10,000 person company. So much smaller than it is now, but still quite big by those days, this is sort of late 80s. And from there, I went to a company that had only 80 people, which was Sybase. And right before I was about to sort of join Sybase, I got a call from the recruiter and they said, there's been a downturn. So that was sort of the first recession we were all seeing. And she said, are you still wanting to take the job? We've just done 10 to 15% layoff. And I was very excited about the job, not from just a financial perspective, but from academic perspective, from sort of a core passion of the kind of architectures they were building. And I said, is my salary still the same? Do I still have a job? She said, yes, yes. So I just took the job and joined. And I remember within the first month, we had a meeting with the CEO and CTO, like a happy hour town hall. And he said, we've been unsuccessful in raising money, but we have venture debt and we are trying to raise money. It didn't process. I didn't process. It only took many years to understand that they were really didn't have a lot of money in the bank, but I just left a very secure job. But part of it was putting your passion before sort of any calculations around how you manage your career. And that has always been a very strong guide for me. So when I was starting my first company, I had been in enterprise software world all my life. I had no idea of consumer, yet the idea that came to me was very consumer centric. So for months, I kept saying, I'm not the guy to do it, but the idea and the passion wouldn't go away. And as an entrepreneur, when everything starts to feel like a nail to your hammer of an idea, like I could solve this, I could solve this, I could solve this, that's when you get passionate. And that's when I started to put together a team and went through a slow incubation process to start my first company. So I think that focus on really leading with heart and passion has guided my thinking as I've started to look at different points in my career.
I see. So trusting your gut feel more than a secure job in some ways, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Manish, most founders in the Valley are ideas people. How does one transition from ideas to execution, to raising funds, to building the team and being successful in the marketplace?
Yeah, so a few things. I would say everything starts with people. In fact, at Poshmark, we have one of our core values is focus on people. And for me, that's very important. So building the team, connecting with the right people, even building a consumer startup as an enterprise person, it was really about building the right people around you and incubating and being open to bringing different people. So I had to tap into networks that were social networks, that were work networks, that were professional networks, IIT networks. My first two board members were both from IIT. Professor Rajiv Motwani, who's since passed, and Ashish Gupta, who you may know as founder of Alien Ventures and Jungly. Right. But then, help comes from unexpected sources. Kanwal Reiki, who was a board member at Versada, was one of my early investors at Caboodle. And then other people from family, my father-in-law was an early investor in Caboodle. So you kind of draw into various networks to sort of go forward. The other thing which you have to do is you have to be open to knowing what your strengths are and complementing with other things. We have, like Poshmark, we have a value called embrace your weirdness, which means not embracing the fact that you're weird, which we all are, but more importantly, understanding that weirdness means you have some strengths and you have some strengths. And if we can recognize each other's strengths, we can form a better team and bring people together. And then the last thing, I think this is something we all forget sometimes, is for me, at least my mindset has been whenever you raise money, whenever you sort of take money from it, you have to return it with interest back. You have to give ROI. And those three things have sort of served me well as I've looked at different stages of my journey.
Excellent. So that kind of segues into my next question, that do you have any advice for budding entrepreneurs for success, especially in the partners, co-founders you choose when you start your venture?
Yes, a few things. I would say when you think of a budding entrepreneur, first of all, start to prepare for your journey for a few years. It's people want to have this role model that, I have to start my company by 23 or 24 or 28 or 30. There's no specific time. Very much like, if you look at the modern life, there's no specific time to even get married. There's so many alternative ways. So you have to break the rule and say that I can start my company at 40. I start my company at 50. I can start my company at 25. I'm not sort of saying you don't, but you have to get ready for it. You have to prepare for it. Similarly, when you're building partners and teams, you have to prepare for it. And I call that process almost like dating. You have to sort of get to know them. You have to spend time with them. You have to have very open discussions. When I was starting my first company, we had very open discussions. We knew how much each of us had in our bank balance. I sort of said, here's the timeline we all have to commit to. Here's sort of the amount of money we would have to commit to. And are you able to manage your family with this? Do you have enough sort of financial freedom to do this? So we had pretty open conversations around, because we were starting this company when I was in my late 30s. Several of us had kids. We certainly were all married. We had mortgages. So it was not a simple decision. None of us had hit big in our life at that point in time. The other thing you have to do is to make sure that you have shared values and commitment. And that is also very open discussion. Why are you doing this? The why is very important to know besides the skill set. And if you have those kinds of open discussions, even then fractures can happen, right? And then you have to recognize this partnership is not working out and have ways to get out of those partnerships. And, in long journeys, all of those things happen. My co-founders who I, ultimately went probably they're still here 13, 14 years later with me, working side by side. So that's a testament to the kind of partnership we've all created and the faith and trust we have. And we've gone through, ups and downs with the company. Company went public, company went private, and we're still all here, together. So I think that's the kind of partnerships you want to build.
Excellent. Yeah. So the chemistry has to be right, and then the commitment to be through thick and thin has to be there in a sustainable way, I guess. So Manish, what is the best piece of advice you got while growing Poshmark or in general in your career, and from who?
I think for me, the few things that changed my journey from Caboodle was a different process and Poshmark was a different process, So with Poshmark, I had to be intentional. Why am I doing a journey for the second time? What sort of do I want out of it? And one of the biggest piece of advice was think big. So how do you sort of think big? And my advice is that when you think of something that's big, it is about how the entrepreneur connects to that idea and how they visualize it. Of course, you have to execute, you have to build the right people, but it's also your imagination of how big that can be. For example, when we were thinking of this idea back in 2010, 2011, the mindset was that used clothing business could not be that big. It would be a niche play and you have to really become a retail business. And here we are, 12, 13 years later, and the resale business is mainstream. Major brands are opening up resale sections. Major department stores have resale section. So resale has taken over the world, driven by a lot of different forces. But our imagination was always that we are reinventing how people buy and sell fashion as opposed to just focusing on resale. And we continue to pursue that journey even today.
Wow. Yeah. So if I were to reverse this, what would you tell other aspiring CEOs at this point? I mean, you got that advice, but what advice would you give other aspiring CEOs?
My advice would be surround yourself with great people and don't be afraid to share the pie with great people around you so you can build something bigger, number one. Number two, persist. Right? Basically focus and persist. That's a second sort of very important trait. And the third is recognize the broader waves. If you are, many of the entrepreneurs are in technology and technology kind of goes through waves. In a way, we intentionally rode the mobile wave when we were starting this company. Well, we have a new wave starting. And again, it may feel like the game is already over or the game is at its peak, which is around artificial intelligence, and machine learning has reached a level of productivity today that it can really impact our life, And on the one hand, there's lots of ramifications around. On the other hand, it will create a 10 to 12 year cycle of innovation and development. And as you think about ideas you have, businesses you have, if they can connect to that wave, that's likely to be very, very successful. It has more chances of being successful. And the third thing is, when money is being given to you, be judicious, but at the same time, also don't worry about the fact that how much dilution you have, because your capital requirements typically will be more than what is being offered to you. And the times at which you can raise the money in a favorable way are also very rare. So don't be conservative. Don't think that this particular time where money is coming to you will persist, because the next time the money could be very, very hard to get. So those are all sort of the thinking that sometimes entrepreneurs can get very short-sighted or not think through. enough to kind of build a business that will be lasting and be here for a long time.
I see. Okay. So why did you decide to get acquired by Naver, and how are things going now that you're a private company again?
Yeah, so I think when we were looking at, in our initial conversations, when they were very much focused on partnership, access to global markets, access to some of their technology stack around search and image recognition. And as the talks progressed based on sort of where we were and where our growth ambitions were and sort of some of the pieces we were doing, as well as where the public markets were likely to be for a while, it became interesting for us to explore Naver, and Naver brought to the table that they wanted to acquire us. And all of that then aligned in a place where I saw it's in the best interest of our investors, public investors. It's in the best interest of our team. It's in the best interest of our community and customers, and broadly benefiting the resale things. When I saw every stakeholder was going to win, that's when we aligned and agreed to get acquired in October of 2022, and the acquisition completed early January this year. So it's been about 8 months or so since we've been on this journey, 7 months really, not even 8 months, 7 months, and things are going well. We've released first piece of integration using Naver's tech stack in the form of Posh Lens, which allows people to shop resale with a click of a button. You can look at an item and it can immediately recognize and finds you matching items on there. And we want to use this technology to then enable generative AI to get people to sell faster. We were launching live streaming when we were talking to them. We've since then launched our live streaming in the form of Posh shows, and they've really taken off as an important piece of the business. And we continue to look at more synergies around search, around personalization, around generative AI with them. So super exciting. And I think so far it's going well.
So it seems complementary and synergistic in every way. So that's great. Congratulations on that exit. And also, this is such a wonderful trajectory and career, as I mentioned. And thank you so much for sharing these words of wisdom with our viewers. Finally, some parting comments from you, whatever comes to your mind for our viewers that you would want them to leave with.
Well, I wanted to share a couple of things. First of all, thank you for having me, Upesh. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. But also, I wanted to share a couple of things. I would say, remember that whatever you can think small, you can think big. And secondly, your thoughts matter. How you think about life, how you think about future, how you dream the future, is likely to materialize that way. And to that end, there's a couple of books I always recommend reading in the entrepreneurship journey. They're not business books, they're not entrepreneurship books, but they are the spirituality of entrepreneurship. One of the books is The Alchemist, which I think is probably one of the most sold books or the most read book in the world, but I still feel like it's an amazing book to read and reread multiple times. And in that same vein is another very powerful book called The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, which I really like. And then the last book that I often think is powerful, although it's been a little bit too much on the pop culture side recently, but I think it's still very powerful, is The Secret by Rhonda Burns.
Awesome. Manish, I really enjoyed talking to you today, and I'm sure our viewers will benefit by your journey and your advice. I'd like to wish you the best of luck for your journey and all future endeavors. Thanks a lot to you and your entire team for giving this time and arranging everything. Thank you again. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me, Upesh. Thank you.
Thank you.